Hi, I'm Aaron Grizel from the Northern California Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Foundation and from BCAF, the Black and Brown Comix Arts Festival in San Francisco. We're happy to participate in Comic-Con's At Home 2020 panels with a discussion on diversity and comics, featuring Eisner Award winners John Jennings and Frederick Aldama, 2019 Dwayne McDuffie awardee Christina Steenz Stewart, animated filmmaker Ché Grayson, and David Walker, who's been nominated for 2 Eisners this year. Our panel is moderated by BCAF's chair, anthropologist Stanford Carpenter. We join the discussion already in progress.
Well, the interesting thing is we actually did start talking about some of the questions I want to ask. So we'll be circling back to our conversation a little bit.
Okay.
I kind of wanted to start off with everybody just talk about one, just give us a summary of one project that you're working on that you're most passionate about right now.
So it's hard. I know I'm supposed to talk about like Heart of the City or Side Quest, which are all great projects and I love them dearly, but I'm actually working on one myself to sell. It's a How to Buy a House in 3 Parts mini comic. There's just so much that you don't know when it comes to purchasing a home. I mean, that's everything from the vocabulary to understanding how much you need to actually put down on a house. And it's especially hard for freelancers, especially if you're working in comics where things aren't exactly always going to be, regularly coming in money-wise. So I definitely want to like put together a mini comic specifically for freelance cartoonists or writers to understand this is what you're expecting when you get into it, and this is how you can actually get it done.
Wow, that's actually great. Sign me up. And if you kickstart it, I'll put money into it. That's a great idea. I'm not working on it so much right now as the artist is finishing up the graphic novel on the history of the Black Panther Party, which is, sadly more relevant than ever right now. And so Marcus Kwame Anderson, he's the artist, and we've been having to do a fair amount of sort of therapy for each other. It's like just making sure that we're mentally okay. I wrote this stuff knowing that it was going to be difficult to draw, knowing it would be difficult for some people to process. I lived with it for a long time. Now he's living with it. And I'm thinking about what my next nonfiction project is going to be, because I feel like that's where I'm going. That's where my career is going. And so thinking about what's the next nonfiction project going to be, and how do I do something that's relevant but not soul crushing, because when we're dealing with some of these issues surrounding the Black experience, or the even the larger African experience, sometimes it's just soul crushing. It's that thing that somebody is able to read in a matter of minutes. We as creators and as educators, as myself as an armchair historian, we live with it for months, sometimes years, and really trying to understand it. And so I'm also trying to figure out how to make nonfiction comics, nonfiction graphic narratives more commonplace. Like I have a list, and every single one of you is on it with this would be a good project for Steenz to do. This would be, Jennings is the only one who's not really on the list because he's got a million other things. But
everybody else is on my lists. I have meta lists.
Yeah, so do I. So yeah, I haven't talked about this publicly yet, but nonfiction is where I'm going. I'm trying to get my own little imprint somewhere. So that I can start contracting people and working with them to create these narratives that I've now learned how to make and how to turn them into comics. And I don't necessarily have time to write the graphic novel about the life of Ida B. Wells, but that graphic novel needs to be out there.
That's right.
There's so many things like that. So that's if anyone who's watching this, this video got some money, just, call me up because I will spend it for you.
For me, I'm most excited because, I graduated a year ago. I literally walked a year ago, and now I'm in a spot where I've said to myself, I've gone to film school, I'm writing comics, and I really want to get into TV. And for my thesis, I did a TV pilot, and that's kind of where my head is at right now. And my pilot was supposed to screen at Tribeca Film Festival, which was postponed because of COVID. And that was a really hard hit because that would have been such a huge opportunity. But Tribeca was fortunately able to do some events virtually, which allowed me to make connections with people in the industry. And I was able to get a manager. And now I find myself in a position where not only am I working on my own original pilots to pitch and trying to get staffed in TV, but I just got a co-writing job for an animated TV show.
Awesome.
Very
Happened via
nice.
Twitter.
Yeah.
I got a job off Twitter to write a show that I can't say yet, but it was based on a graphic novel, and it's now a very popular show. And yeah, that's going to be the next 2 months, is doing that episode and trying to get into other rooms. So I'm really excited to get paid to write for TV.
Yeah. Get that money.
That is so
Get that
dope.
money.
That is so awesome.
Yeah.
So who's next? Frederick, you? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about basically race and coming of age comics, and also the recreations that we've been seeing, kind of piggybacking off what you were just talking about, because there seems to be interest in taking comics from a white space into a brown and black sort of recreated space in these sort of Netflix platforms and other streaming platforms. So it's not just CW anymore. It's like, that's kind of throwing these, well, CW is good at recasting, but not kind of re-anchoring culturally, historically. But yeah, I'm seeing some really creative stuff there. I'm seeing some really creative stuff in like I said, the DC teen graphic novel reboots. And so, yeah, that's what I'm working on, but also bringing in things like Parable and I Am Alfonso Jones and other spaces to really show people the significance and importance of not just character, but also built spaces in this recreation, this attempt to recreate story worlds that are brown and black.
Thanks for the shout out, by the way, for those two. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm just finishing up the first Megascope book. It's a Nnedi Okorafor short story that we, myself and David Braham, adapted. So that's very exciting. We're in the final edits for that, hopefully. What I'm thinking. Yeah, so that should be going to print soon, actually, even though it was supposed to be dropping in October, but because of the pandemic, it got pushed back to like February, I think. And, of course, the other thing is I've just been like overseeing like 13 other books. It's crazy. Actually like I just got drafts in from second drafts from books, and it's been really interesting. Like the creative process has been so necessary to be online and stuff because of what's been going on. And so some people I'm actually like collaborating on WhatsApp. Some other people I'm collaborating like Facebook. It's been interesting. So that's been really cool. I finished a 16-page comic for this anthology, also for Abrams. That was pretty cool. I totally did myself, so that's fun. I'm working on a short story, like a prose short story right now. That's set in like my Cybertrap space. Just for you, for those listening. So the Cybertrap is like Black Southern cyberpunk. Because basically, if you look at like a lot of science fiction stories, not only is it not diverse in a particular, in any particular fashion in sometimes, but it's definitely, not Southern in a lot of times. I think, the South is always still, attributed with like slavery and like backwardness, and we don't really think of it as even having a future, so to speak. So, so the cyber trap is like, it's I'm kind of obsessed with it. So I'm actually making some stuff there. I'm working on RPG right now too, set there. Been kind of toying with that and talking to some people. What's wrong? Why are you shaking your head? Anyway,
there's only 24 hours in the day, son.
Well, I mean, you just work on a little bit here and there,
Yeah.
and then, yeah, and I'm excited about making more positive comics. I think what it is I slide into the darkness really easily, Scorpio, and, I'm really into horror and like the dread, the horrific things. I always go like, oh, that could go real bad. It's always like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, here's a flower. I was like, you know what? That could go real bad. That's where my mind goes, because I'm like, well, because people, right? Because people, are terrible sometimes, most times. So, so I'm trying to, having a son has actually changed how I look at like the Afro future a lot, and I'm like, my tendency is to make things that are more gothic and more, I don't know if it's pessimistic is the right term for it, but, I need to make things that are a lot more accessible to folk, younger people. So I'm looking forward to try to develop that kind of stuff. I'm still gonna make like really scary things because that's just my predilection. I'm adept at it, but I'm really looking forward to creating narratives that I think are a little bit more accessible by younger audiences, and trying to see how that works out. And also trying to figure out ways to work faster, because for instance, doing things that I'm always trying to figure out techniques to work more quickly. Shifting to digital has helped a lot, still not fast enough. Coming up on like 50 years on this planet, unless they come up with like some type of, technology that extends our life and I can like upload into like multiple computers, I'm probably not gonna live another 50 years, So I'm trying to figure out ways to document all the projects I'm working on, which are literally hundreds of things in my head, to try to figure out which ones I need to work on first, or at least like, trick somebody into working on them with me, to kind of get stuff out. Anyway, all right, I'm gonna stop talking because it's like that is a really like, yeah. Oh, and one more thing. My side project though, what I'm really in love with is I love taking like public domain characters and like creating newer versions of them. That's a hobby that's actually turned into projects that I'm working on. So that's it. That's all the things.
What are your hobbies, John Jennings? Oh, it's working harder than most people do in their day.
I love what I do. Let me alone.
Well,
I give you a hard time.
I know, man. I already get that. I already have that. I'm married to that. Shit.
I guess the next question for all of us should be like, so John, what would each of you have John do in his copious spare time?
It is so uncopious. Is that a word?
It is now.
Anti-copial.
I would have John rest. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
You know what I do? I rest. I slept real good last night.
I'm just giving him a hard time. I'm just grateful. You know what? I'm grateful for all of y'all because it like I needed this morning.
I was so looking forward to it.
And really just to hear all the ideas that are going on. I think that one of the interesting things, and John and I talk fairly regularly. It's easy to get caught up in this trap of thinking you're the only one who cares about this stuff. You're the only one who does this stuff. Maybe you see someone post on Twitter, maybe you see something on Instagram, but you become so insulated in this creative space.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to know that there's other people out there doing things and that, because sometimes, at least for me, it feels like there's this burden of trying to get something done because there's some kid out there that needs to be inspired the way I never was.
That freaking kid.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually just having this conversation in a Discord that I have for gender marginalized people of color in comics. And, you know, we were talking about how it always feels like it's on us to make the change.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have that sense of responsibility on your shoulders, on top of living as a person of color,
Exactly.
on top of everything that's going on right now, it becomes a lot, you know? So it's definitely really important to have your squad, your team, your collection of people to remember that, you know, that responsibility of being the one that has to change it isn't actually just on you, and it's something that we can all work on together. There's one thing that I'm currently working on, is making a comic standard script, and we're going to be like authors and professors and artists and publishers, you know, making sure that it feels like something that we can use, because, you know, I used to always say that nothing's going to change in the comic industry because we don't even have a standard script. And it's like, if we don't even have that, what else is there, you know? So then it's just like, you know what, I need to stop joking about this. And what if we just did it, you know? And it felt like a lot of pressure, but then the more I talked about it with the people in that Discord, we were like, no, let's just do this now. Then we just started sharing all of our scripts and going to like the script archive on Comics Experience and really looking it over and realizing that this is something that can be done, and it doesn't have to feel like pressure. It feels like progress, you know?
And I just got to add to that, Steenz, because first off, if I'm down, if you need any help with this, you know, because I teach writing for comics, and one of the first things I tell the students is, you know, there is no standard script format for comics, but I've started telling them there is no standard format. But if you don't use this format right here, I'm going to give you an F. And because that permission that I give them a lot of times makes them feel like there's no rules at all.
Yeah.
So, hence, I'll get a script with literally. I once got a script with like 35 panels on one page with action and dialogue in all 35 panels, you know?
Holy, it's trying to make your head explode.
Yeah. And it's there's, you know, Kelly Sue DeConnick just posted something the other day. It was really profound, and I'm still thinking about it a lot. And it's about it's about breaking into this industry, and how getting into the comics industry is very different than getting into film and TV and even publishing. And a lot of it is based upon cozying up to gatekeepers or already established people. And there's these power dynamics that are more often than not based in gender and race that require a lot of us to put ourselves in vulnerable situations.
Right.
In an already vulnerable situation, right? Because like sending out your manuscript to an agent or a publisher isn't hard enough.
Yeah,
but you have to be like, yo, is this, you know, for me as a man, is it like, am I dealing with this person who's secretly a racist? Whereas I know that there's a lot of predators out there too, you know, and that's something that is really starting to sink in with me more the older I get, and in the relationships that I build with other creators, and thinking about that power dynamic, because I'm in a privileged position of not having to think about it up to a certain point.
Right.
And so, yeah, all this is, anyway, Steen's point is I'll help you out.
Good on
Excellent.
you.
So
No,
You're on my
seriously.
list. On the list.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've come up against, because I'm working with some writers who've never written comics before, and Damien's scripts. Damien, my co-adapter for Parable and for Kindred, and is a partner for like 15 years. He has a script, this format that Abrams really likes, and so they actually have kind of so they've been telling people like, okay, make your scripts like this, you know. But even that is like, you know, hard, because people are like, well, I just wrote this thing, and I was like, oh, this is how we're gonna actually translate this story. I don't know yet. No, so that's been interesting, you know.
You know, my dream is to have something like they have in Europe, in places like France and Belgium and stuff, where they have institutions that are basically there to support creators. Period.
Yeah.
Like, so, you know, like you all can be like doing your thing, and you're getting basically a salary.
Yeah.
Yeah. They have actual arts institutions where films are made and everything is made through that. And it's, and
You know,
the
here
US
it's
is like the only country that doesn't do it.
I know, it bugs me. And then that we have to go to Kickstarters and like these things, and it's like, what the you know, this is like so backward. There's so much power and money in this country, and look how backward we are, right?
It's interesting because what you're touching on made me think of my orientation when I was a Smithsonian fellow, and one of the things I was having a conversation with one of my mentors, and you know, John Franklin, and he was like, you know, the thing you have to understand about like the Smithsonian and where this fits in America is that America is one of the only like countries, it's not just industrial countries, but even like small countries that you've never heard of, they all have something that America doesn't, a ministry of culture. And he was talking about how the size, literally the size of the Smithsonian, and the fact that it's a public trust, so it does have a governmental component as well as a non-governmental component and a for-profit component. It means that it slides into that position, as you know, it kind of takes over for the lack of it, but it isn't really it really isn't. It still isn't a ministry of culture. So you're right. We don't have the institution, and even when we had a more robust National Endowment for the Arts, right? That didn't do it either. It tried to, you know. I mean, and I think and given the panel, I think what's really interesting thinking about is maybe talking a little bit about what that means for something like diversity, because you know it's usually institutions that will come in and be that counterweight for groups that don't have as much power or access, like they can actually make space.
Right.
So I mean, I'd like to hear. Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be interesting to talk about like how is it that we make space for the difference that we represent?
Well, it reminds me of a tweet that I saw the other day that had kind of like a graphic of what the essential workers were and then the non-essential workers. So on the left was like, you know, postal workers, sanitation workers, stuff like that. And on the right side, it was like of non-essential, it was like artists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And someone tweeted, "It took an artist to make this graphic for you."
Right. Right.
So how is art not essential?
Right.
We literally couldn't convey the information without that
some type
design.
of exactly.
So it's just really, I think what America is in a state of right now is unlearning and being able to just delete the thing you thought was true when you find out it's not true.
Right.
And I think the way art operates is that it's this thing that is very much misused in the sense that, you know, if it can make money, it will be important for the purpose of making money.
Right.
But then in terms of making sure that you keep making money, they don't actually have something to make art sustainable. Art is not sustainable. That's the issue. Everything that I've been able to create, I've done through loans, and if I'm lucky, I've done through Kickstarter. That's a problem. So I think that if we don't unlearn the role of art, if we don't institutionalize art in a way that doesn't involve the revisionist implications of white folks who have made it, you know, their mission to have a gatekeeper and say, this is what all the stories are going to look like. So all of y'all are confused and watch The Help instead of Miss Juneteenth when it's time to actually figure things out. So it's really attacking it from different levels. And I think if we can start with comics, then maybe it can be a broader conversation. I know that the grooming and the predatory behavior in comics spilled over into film this week, which is great to see. So that's what I'm hoping, that there's a domino effect. If we can say, we are comics creators, that's where we're going to attack this issue, then it's very possible that it can then branch out into other aspects of the art.
You know, it's there's something about comics, because it is a visual medium attached with writing, that people are able to look at comics and feel something. You know, if you make a comic about being the only Black person in your D&D group, someone, you know, hundreds of miles away is going to feel that, and and it's because they're able to visualize it and to see it.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing when it comes to making a comic about, we just bought the wrong kind of toothpaste and it's agonizing. You know, so it's like, we need both kinds of stories. You know, we need the stories where it's like, this is a problem and we want you to look at this problem, because once you see it, you can feel it. But then also, this is a story about us being normal, regular, ordinary, average day people, so that you can see it and you can feel it. Because once you actually understand that, oh, you know, you're Black and you got this wrong toothpaste and it agonized your family and it was hilarious, and someone else can be like, I'm white and I had the same problem, we are the same. You know, and it's like, it's those small things, I think, is what's going to help, you know, get people to understand that visual aspect is what it is.
Right.
And so another thing that I think is also interesting is that, you know, to put it lightly, this has been a tough 3 months, right? You know, we started by going into lockdown for a pandemic.
It is lightly.
Yeah, and then, you know, and then all of a sudden we, you know, and I actually think that the pandemic, having so many people be home and being able to watch the 24-hour news cycle, really queued up the uprisings and the protests around Black Lives Matter, right? Because it's not just that we could see it, but all of a sudden it's like we're seeing it over and over again, because a lot of people, quite frankly, you know, had a lot more time in front of the TV, you know?
Well, and here's the thing, no distractions, no NBA, no NFL, no baseball.
Yeah.
The undivided attention.
No comics before a while. No comics. No, you know, you basically have to deal with it.
And it's so funny, the difference, the actual formation of BLM after Trayvon Martin. I went to Ferguson, and this was during the time that I was in film school, and taking the bus to go with other folks who are now huge people in the movement. That experience was very alienating for me when I then had to reintegrate back into mainstream society, because I went with all of these folks and it was so powerful and so just necessary for me. And then I went back to film school, and, you know, my white classmates were like, she's militant. So I'm militant for caring about my life.
Right.
Or oh, like, that's the girl who went to Ferguson. That's the one who actually cared, the pro-Black girl. And so that was 5 years ago. Yeah. And now, like, the same white people understand the movement differently. It's the same movement.
Same thing.
It's the same movement, but they're understanding it differently. And now they understand my anger, which is like a perk, but not really, like, that wasn't our intention. I don't think that was our intention to say, like, we kind of abandoned needing to change those minds, but they've changed.
Right.
And they understand. And that's very interesting. And I think they understand because of the pandemic. I think because of the lack of distraction and the lack of saying, but these NFL stars, and it's just even the thing of, and the same thing for Colin Kaepernick. When he nailed then, you were mad, and now you're not mad now. It's the same thing. We've been dying this whole time, but everyone's like waking up.
Well, it's also interesting in the wake of it, like just seeing companies just kind of bend over backwards to be like, okay, how can we show that we're down? How can we like, you know, make it look like, you know, make like we support, you know, the people of color who work for us. And part of me just feels like the subtext of it is, please don't burn my stuff down.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
exactly what it is.
Oh, yeah.
Pictures from any time where there's been, well, there's always been racial unrest, but whenever there's been uprisings in cities, you always see a picture of a business that has a sign in the window that says, you know, either Black-owned business or Black-friendly business, and that's all these companies are doing. And it's and you know, some of them are doing it from a more genuine, caring place. Some of them are, as Ché was saying, waking up a little bit more.
Right.
I think the burning question, though, is what do we as creators, how do we work with that? Because there's these moments, I've had so many phone calls the last 2-3 weeks where it's like, yo, I just got an offer from HBO and I know why they're offering me this deal. Do I take it? You know, am I, I've had people say, am I an Uncle Tom? Am I a sellout? Am I, and it's, you know, because there's the notion of woke and broke, you know, like you can't be woke unless you're broke. And it's a difficult thing, you know. I mean, I had one of those calls earlier this week where I was like, yo, where's this call coming from? Is this because you respect me as a creator and want me on your team? Or is it because, you know, I'm the friendly, high yellow Negro who you can sort of push out?
But you know, the thing is, I think we all think it's the latter. I think we all know it's the latter.
Well, when you have situations where you have like, so you all saw the like 250 plus Black people that were on Abel. She has they have a database of Black illustrators, creators, so it's graphic design, a little bit of everything. And last week, someone sent out a blast email saying, you know, we need a graphic designer, and it was to like all 260 people on that database. And so it was very clear that they were just looking to hire someone because they were Black, rather than because of their skill set. Because if it was because of their skill set, they would have done the research to see, well, which one of these people are actually graphic designers, you know? And this didn't just happen once. This happened twice in a week. And so it's like, when it comes to, you know, comics and the creative space, it's very clear when people are just trying to put a Band-Aid on something. And I think in order for there to actually be change, it needs to start from the top, you know?
Exactly.
We need to figure out who are these editors that are sending out these blast emails. Are they white, or are they a person of color, you know? Or, you know, we need to think about what kind of changes are you making, and are they worthwhile? Because while some places want to do like, oh, here's an internship for, you know, a Black person at this publisher, you have to think about, okay, well, why do you assume that we need an internship and not a job? Or who's going to be a mentor? Who's going to be a mentor in that situation? Because but also, you can't have an internship without a mentor.
And also, why do you assume that all of us are green? Why do you assume that we haven't been doing this for the long, like we're not, there are people who have been in the game 15, 20 years. You can't offer them the same thing as me who's done it for 5 years. Like we actually are skilled.
Yeah, so
we're not just Black.
We can see, you know, we can tell when things are not genuine. So I do think in terms of what to do next is to, you know, do what we can to, for us anyways, do what we can to get into those positions of power. But for, you know, people who are not a person of color, I do believe that they need to start thinking about, well, what are some actionable things that I can do that doesn't come off as, you know, offensive.
Also, I have a question for everyone. In the past 3 weeks, have you had a moment where you've said to yourself, oh, is this what it's like to be privileged, like a white person? With all the good news that you've gotten, with all of that, have you said, because I honestly don't think we're getting special treatment. I don't think that the opportunities that have come my way in the past 3 weeks are special treatment. I literally think that's just how white people get treated.
Oh,
That the fact that a white man can have a debut novel and get $800,000 and say it changes his life. I'm like, do you understand that that could change 8 people's life? That can change 8 Black people's life.
Right, exactly.
$100,000 could change 8. So I'm thinking to myself, like,
I'm concerned.
it's just hemorrhaging. Like the actual resources are so hemorrhaged towards white people that, like, you know, I just don't want the narrative to then begin white people saying, you know, now we're not going to get jobs and this and that. We're literally getting, for the blip of a second, getting treated like you have been for hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years. Yeah. I don't know if I felt like that though, but that's a really interesting statement. You know,
Yeah.
I've kind of processed it almost as sort of an anemic attempt at low-key reparations.
Yes.
I mean,
yes, I see that. Yep.
I
like
mean,
it
especially when I think of it in terms of like, you know, how long did it take for us to get the MLK holiday? It took like years. It took like 4 years to get it through Congress, I think. I don't know the exact.
No, you make a good point.
It was years. Juneteenth, 1 week.
Well,
yeah,
but you know, Stanford, it's reparations always with the bottom line, which is
yes,
profit.
Yeah. Oh,
you know, American Dirt, which kind of started us off with the Latinx communities, as you guys know, the writing communities, the comics communities earlier this year, where we had a gabacha white lady who kind of like did this terrible hack job writing a story about, you know, I mean, it's the worst fiction you could ever possibly read. But you know, the thing that was crazy about it, we did get our moment, and there was almost a moment of kind of unionizing among our writers, which I think is another thing for us to think about, like how we can together in solidarity kind of change this system. Because I guess what I'm getting at is, in the end, there was still this weird, and you know, it was the Oprah weirdness, like Oprah in that space of white privilege and people kind of like grappling for that. All these Latinx writers that have been historically pushed to the side, kind of, and I was like, this is not how we should be responding in the end. Like, but like David and you all have been saying, there's the structure, the power structure is such that whether we have an Oprah in that space or we have the president of Macmillan who made just gobs of money off of that terrible novel, the structure itself, like the structure right now, as you guys have been saying, we're forcing people to decolonize. Well, we need to do that too with our structures of creativity, I think. And what can that look like tomorrow for us?
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like, and maybe this is just my age talking, I don't know, but I'm so tired and so worn out and so of the struggle of just trying to get that work that I know that I'm qualified for, and I was having a conversation with Christopher Priest about this recently, where it was like, you know, I've reached that point where I'm not just dealing with racism, I'm also starting to deal with ageism, right? Which is a crazy concept to think about, but I'm just to the point where I'm like, well, I'm just going to do it myself. Like I'm defining what success means on my own terms, and it's interesting because I had a meeting right before the pandemic, like literally weeks before the pandemic. I was down in Hollywood. I had a meeting, and it was with a production company that was considering giving my development company money, and they said, well, why are you going the Kickstarter route? Why are you doing things the way you're doing, as opposed to, you could be working with a company like us. We could give you money and help you develop this stuff. And I looked at him, I said, because I'm not a sharecropper, and I understand the dynamic of how slavery went from sharecropping, which was which is essentially the same model, just with a little bit of sugar sprinkled on it, right? Why am I going to put all of my time and energy and resources into creating something that you will then own, that if you're making billions of dollars off of it and I'm only making thousands of dollars off of it, there's a huge problem. And that's when I realized it's not just my age that keeps me from getting work. It's also that attitude of when an editor says, oh, well, you know, why don't you just create a new supervillain for Batman to fight? It's like, no, why don't you give me one of the ones that you already own, as opposed to me, you know, creating something new for you. And I've been so used to fighting in the trenches and doing this, not necessarily alone. I think you all know what I mean when I say doing it alone. That I don't even know if I want to go anywhere. You know what I'm saying? I feel like, yeah, this is how I know how to do it. And you know, I know how to go to Kickstarter. It's like I know how to go stand on the street corner and ask for spare change. If that's what I got to do to survive on my own terms, maybe that's what I need to do. I'm feeling cynical. That's, I guess, the problem.
But are you kind of resigned in that way, or do you think you kind of go between the two constantly? Like, where do you think?
I go between the two. It's you know, just as the pandemic has caused a lot of America to wake up, the pandemic has caused me to spend a lot of time in my own head in ways that aren't always healthy. Which is what I think all of us do anyway, right?
No, that's
of course.
How many of us are sitting here trying to be creative, but then also just trying to figure out how to survive and how to make it better for not just ourselves and for the generation before us, but for the generations that are coming afterwards. It sometimes feels like there's a lot on I'll just say, I'll personalize it. I feel like there's a lot on my shoulders, and you know, John happens to be one of the few people I can talk to about this regularly, and not feel like when him and I are talking, I don't feel like he's dumping on me and I don't feel like I'm dumping on him. But I also know that I have to be careful because there's some people who I am in a position of privilege. I've got a multi-book deal right now. You know what I'm saying? That's more than a lot of other people have. So do I have that right to complain that my multi-book deal isn't as much as this person over here? You know,
I think it's important though to like acknowledge the pressure and acknowledge the privilege at the same time, especially considering, you know, as teachers and as professors, you know, one thing that I really try not to do with my kids is make them depressed about the industry. You know, I want to be honest with them. You know, I want to be like, this is how it actually is, and this is how it happens. You know, but I also we also have to be sure to do it in a way that's like, but you have the opportunity to make that change. You know, and you have the opportunity to see that there are good things, you know, going on. And I think the only reason why I keep that in mind is because I do teach and I do, you know, lead, you know, communities. And I just like, I think about, you know, we're all in the same boat, you know, and I don't think anyone who is, whether they're a mentee or a mentor, is going to make us feel like, oh, why do you think you have so much pressure on your shoulders? That's crazy. Like, I don't think we're going to get gaslit by each other, which is really, really nice.
Well, I think, you know, like also in trying to be hopeful but realistic, I think the most helpful thing for me was just understanding kind of the smoke and mirrors of the industry, which is that the big two aren't the only place to go. Like film school taught me you have to get into Sundance, basically, or you're a loser. And if you and if you're coming into the game, it's basically like, if you don't get into the big two, you're like, if you're not really in it yet. And so what I like is the idea that, like, while you are dreaming to be at DC or Marvel and DC are trying to figure out how to be as successful as Webtoons is right now.
That's correct.
So it's just understanding that, like, it's bigger, understanding that Kickstarter allowed Check Please to be what it is, not the big two, not Image, not any of those. And just knowing that more than anything, comics is a community. Like, I, as someone who straddles different industries, comics is a straight up community of people who genuinely share an interest in this medium. And so,
hey, that's all we have time for, but the panel continues. If you want to find out more, go to norcalmlkfoundation.org and learn more about the guests. We look forward to seeing you soon.